Chapter 13. Bunce's Giant Storehouse. "My dear Foxy," cried Badger, "what in the world has happened to your tail?" "Please don't talk about it," said Mr. Fox. "It's a painful subject." They were digging the new tunnel. They dug on in silence. Badger was a great digger, and the tunnel went forward at a terrific pace now that he was lending a paw. Soon they were crouching underneath yet another wooden floor. Mr. Fox grinned slyly, showing sharp white teeth. "If I'm not mistaken, my dear Badger," he said, "we are now underneath the farm which belongs to that nasty little pot-bellied dwarf, Bunce. We are, in fact, directly under the most interesting part of that farm." "Ducks and geese!" cried the small foxes, licking their lips. "Juicy, tender ducks and big, fat geese." "Exactly," said Mr. Fox. "But how in the world can you know where we are?" asked Badger. Mr. Fox grinned, showing even more white teeth. "Look," he said, "I know my way around these farms blindfold. For me it's just as easy below ground as it is above it." He reached high and pushed up one wooden floorboard and then another. He poked his head through the gap. "Yes!" he shouted, jumping up into the room above. "I've done it again. I've hit it smack on the nose, right on the bull's-eye. Come and look." Quickly Badger and the three small foxes scrambled up after him. They stopped and stared. They stood and gaped. They were so overwhelmed they could not speak. For what they now saw was a kind of fox's dream, a badger's dream, a paradise for hungry animals. "This, my dear old Badger," proclaimed Mr. Fox, "is Bunce's mighty storehouse. All his finest stuff is stored in here before he sends it off to market. Against all the four walls of the great room, stacked in cupboards and piled upon shelves reaching from floor to ceiling, were thousands and thousands of the finest and fattest ducks and geese, plucked and ready for roasting. And up above, dangling from the rafters, there must have been at least 100 smoked hams and 50 sides of bacon." "Just feast your eyes on that!" cried Mr. Fox, dancing up and down. "What do you think, eh? Pretty good grub." Suddenly, as though springs had been released in their legs, the three hungry small foxes and the ravenously hungry Badger sprang forward to grab the luscious food. "Stop!" shouted Mr. Fox. "This is my party, so I shall do the choosing." The others fell back, licking their chops. Mr. Fox began prowling around the storehouse, examining the glorious display with an expert eye. A thread of saliva slid down one side of his jaw and hung there suspended in mid-air, and then snapped. "We mustn't overdo it," he said. "Mustn't give the game away. Mustn't let them know what we've been up to. We must be neat and tidy, and just take a few of the choicest morsels. So, to start with, we shall have 4 plump young ducks." He took them from the shelf. "Oh, how lovely and fat they are! No wonder Bunce gets a special price for them in the market. All right, Badger, help me get them down. You children can help as well. There we go. Goodness me, look at how your mouths are watering. And now, I think we'd better have a few geese. 3 will be quite enough. We'll take the biggest. Oh my, you'll never see finer geese than these in a king's kitchen. Gently does it. That's the way. And what about a couple of nice smoked hams? I adore smoked ham, don't you, Badger? Fetch me the step-ladder, would you please?" Mr. Fox climbed up the ladder and handed down 3 magnificent hams. "And do you like bacon, Badger?" "I'm mad about bacon," cried Badger, dancing with excitement. "Let's have a side of bacon, the big one up there." "And carrots, Dad," said the smallest of the 3 small foxes. "We must take some of those carrots." "Don't be a twerp," said the fox. "You know we don't eat things like that." "It's not for us, Dad. It's for the rabbits. They only eat vegetables." "Goodness me, you're right. What a thoughtful little fellow you are. Take 10 bunches of carrots." Soon all this lovely loot was lying in a neat heap upon the floor. The small foxes crouched close, their noses twitching, their eyes shining like stars. "And now," said Mr. Fox, "we shall have to borrow from our friend Bunce 2 of those useful push-carts over in the corner." He and Badger fetched the push-carts, and the ducks and geese and hams and bacon were loaded onto them. Quickly the push-carts were lowered through the hole in the floor. The animals slid down after them. Back in the tunnel, Mr. Fox again pulled the floorboards very carefully into place, so that no one could see they had ever been moved. "My darlings," he said, pointing to 2 of the 3 small foxes, "take a cart each and run back as fast as you can to your mother. Give her my love and tell her we are having guests for dinner, the badgers, the moles, the rabbits, and the weasels. Tell her it must be a truly great feast, and tell her the rest of us will be home as soon as we've done one more little job." "Yes, Dad, right away, Dad," they answered, and they grabbed a trolley each and went rushing off down the tunnel. Chapter 14. Badger Has Doubts. "Just one more visit," cried Mr. Fox. "And I'll bet I know where that'll be," said the only small fox now left. He was the smallest fox of them all. "Where?" asked Badger. "Well," said the smallest fox, "we've been to Boggis and we've been to Bunce, but we haven't been to Bean. It must be Bean." "You are right," said Mr. Fox, "but what you don't know is which part of Bean's place we are going to visit." "Which?" they said both together. "Aha," said Mr. Fox, "just you wait and see." They were digging as they talked. The tunnel was going forward fast. Suddenly Badger said, "Doesn't this worry you just a tiny bit, Foxy?" "Worry me?" said Mr. Fox. "What?" "All this stealing." Mr. Fox stopped digging and stared at Badger as though he'd gone completely dotty. "My dear old furry frump," he said, "do you know anyone in the whole world who wouldn't swipe a few chickens if his children were starving to death?" There was a short silence while Badger thought deeply about this. "You are far too respectable." "There's nothing wrong with being respectable," Badger said. "Look," said Mr. Fox, "Boggis and Bunce and Bean are out to kill us. You realise that, I hope?" I do, Foxy, I do indeed," said the gentle Badger. "But we're not going to stoop to their level. We don't want to kill them." "I should hope not, indeed," said Badger. "We wouldn't dream of it. We shall simply take a little food here and there to keep us and our families alive, right?" "I suppose we'll have to." "If they want to be horrible, let them. We down here are decent, peace-loving people." Badger laid his head on one side and smiled at Mr. Fox. "Foxy," he said, "I love you." "Thank you," said Mr. Fox. "Now let's get on with the digging." 5 minutes later, Badger's front paws hit against something flat and hard. "What on earth is that?" he said. "It looks like a stone wall." He and Mr. Fox scraped away the soil. It was a wall, but it was built with bricks, not stones. The wall was right in front of them, blocking their way. "Now who in the world would build a wall under the ground?" asked Badger. "Very simple," said Mr. Fox. "It's the wall of an underground room. And if I'm not mistaken, it is exactly what I'm looking for."